let's talk about ribs. So to start off with, when we start our catdigan, we do a rib to start with, and then we join in with our new colour or the same colour, and so we don't have to decide where to space our rib. So this is what the short rib looks like on the finished catdigan. So that was just 7 chains and then working 6 stitches backwards and forwards for the neckline. But this one on the I was going to say the pink version, but that's pink and purple, and this is pink. So this is the blue version. This one has a deeper rib at the top, and this was worked with 11 chains, and so we've got 10 back loop double crochets going up and down. But we made this rib first and then we attached to it. For the sleeves we have to do the opposite. So for the sleeves and for the other ribs we have to do the opposite. Now I have found that a longer rib creates a much nicer, much snugger fit at the wrist. Okay, it squeezes in a bit more when it's longer. If it's, I mean, it's completely up to you. It's your preference as to whether you want to have it longer or shorter. And as we're doing the sleeve, and I'm going to show you this in a minute, we're going to attach our chain and we're going to work out, I think this one was 13 stitches, so 12 stitches, 13 chains, 12 stitches up and down. And what we do is, and you can kind of just see it here, is that we slip stitch along 3 stitches before we work back up. Then we come back and we slip stitch 3 stitches along. That brings the rib in quite snug. So that's the rib for the sleeve, and I would recommend for the sleeve that you do slip stitch 3 stitches along at the bottom. But for the bottom edge, you might want to do something different. So for the bottom edge, you can do one of 2 things. You can either do it every 2 stitches, which is this one, and that means that we're not going to have any pulling at all. It's quite a nice flat rib. So if you don't want it to pull in, then this is the one for you to do. So it's just doing it every 2. If I'd show you on the back, you can see how nice and neat that looks all the way along there. But that's done every 2 stitches. Let me show you a bit closer. So we've got every 2, so we're slip stitching 2, and so each row of rib you can see is lining up with the tweed stitch, the double crochets there. So that's every 2. So that will lie completely flat to your body, to the thickness of this. If you want to pull it to pull in a little bit, then we're going to do something that's between the 2. So we're going to do a 2 and then a 3 and then a 2 and then a 3. Now on here you can just see a slight difference. That's a 2 slip stitches, that's a 3 slip stitch, 2 slip stitch, 3 slip stitch. So it's slightly different and it slightly pulls in. Not a lot, just a little. But if you want to, you could do every 3 like you did with the cuff, and that will make it very stretchy, very pulling in onto your body. So it just depends on what shape you are, whether you want to have that to be tight or not. I would recommend that you do it every 3 on the cuffs, because I think that's when it pulls in really, really nicely. You can also go down a hook, so you can use a 3mm hook for this if you want to make it even tighter. Just gives it a nice stretch, because, you know, crochet doesn't stretch. Can't make ribs out of crochet. There we go. But you can, of course. So here I'm going to demonstrate how to do the rib, and I will explain what the 3 slip stitches and 2 slip stitches look like. So we're going to imagine that this is the cuff and we're working into tweed stitch. We're going to start where the join is from the previous row, and you can start either into a space or into the stitch or into the join, wherever you like. I'm going to join into the stitch for this first one. So I've made a slip knot on my hook. I'm going to put my hook into the top of my double crochet in the normal way, and then under 2 strands, and then I'm going to pull this loop through. Now I would normally make this with a smaller hook than the one that I've been using for the tweed stitch. So where we've done a 3.5mm hook for the tweed stitch, then a 3mm will make it even snugger. But for the purposes of demonstrating the stitch, I'm just using the same size. So we're going to make 7 chains. Now I would recommend on a cuff that you do at least 13 chains to make a nice deep cuff, but this is just demonstration purposes. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 chains, reasonably loose. You do want to be able to get into them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 chains, sorry, 7 chains. 7 chains, and then we're going to skip the first chain, and we're just going into the second chain here, and we're going to do double crochets, just straight double crochets into each of the stitches along, into each of the chains along the row. So we've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Okay, and then we're going to slip stitch in the next 3 stitches. So we're going to slip stitch in that hole, because that's easier than trying to get into the chain. So we're going to slip stitch into the hole. We're going to slip stitch into the double crochet under 2 strands as per usual, but just a slip stitch, and then we're going to slip stitch into the next chain space like so. We're then going to turn. Now we're going to work into the back loop of the stitches we just made. So this is working out from the main body of the fabric. Okay, so we're going to go slip stitch into the, double crochet into the back loop of the chain. So the back, there's the top of our double crochets there, so it looks like our little hearts, and we're going into the back one. Don't go anywhere near this bit up here, and you can turn either way, doesn't matter, just make sure that it's consistent. So we're going to go in to the first one and do a double crochet, 1, 2. On the way back it is worth counting to make sure we get the right amount. 3, 4, 5. Now this 6th one can sometimes hide a little bit, particularly when you're working in 4-ply. This kind of curls around like that, so as long as you kind of flatten it out so that you can see, we're going into our 6th one here. That's why I recommend doing a little counting, just to make sure. Okay, and then we're going to make a chain, and then we're going to turn, and then we're going to do work into our back loops again. So there's one side, we're going into the back loop, and we're going to make 6 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and again this last one, it can get a little bit hidden, but it is in there. You can see it just there, and we're going into that one 6. Complete the double crochet. Now we were in the chain space when we did our last stitch, so this time we're going to slip stitch into the next stitch, and then into the chain space, and then into the next stitch. So we're working into 3 along. You can see that this is going to actually pull our stitches together, so that's what we want to do. We want to pull the stitches together, and then we're going to turn, and then we're going to work into, now be very, very careful depending on where you turn. You can see a lot of stitches here, but we've got to make sure that we're only going into the double crochet stitches and not the slip stitches. So check your 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3, and then that's our first double crochet, and we're working again into the back loop. Now this bit you can afford to actually bring quite tight down on the first stitch, because that's how it'll bring the fabric together a bit. So don't worry about being too tight on that first one. So then we're working in our back stitches, back loops all the way along, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you can see that my 6th one has hidden itself again. Okay, so we just need to flatten that out a little bit so we can find the loop that we need to go into. There. 1 chain and turn, and then we're going to work back. And again, always good just to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then we're going to slip stitch in a 3, so we're going to have a chain this time because our double crochet was the last one that we did. So we're going to slip stitch into the chain, slip stitch into the double crochet, slip stitch into the chain space, so I should have said chain space, turn, and actually I do prefer the turning that way, so turning that way keeps the yarn behind and actually makes it quite nice and neat at the front there. You can see the first one wasn't quite the same. These two are much neater as we come round. And again, make sure that you go into the right stitch because we only want to do 6 double crochets. So just 1, 2, 3, so it's this one here. And as we do that first stitch, don't worry about pulling it tight, that's good. 1, 2. Split the yarn. 3, 4, 5. We're going to have to find that hidden one again. Look how it's turned. Look how it's turned. Okay, you'd think you were almost at the end, but you're not. It's actually turned right round. So it's there. See where we've just gone into that loop there, and it's this loop here. So that last one can be very tricky to find at the end of the row. So as you can see, we're starting to get a rib effect. And on the other side, you can see that it's starting to pull the fabric together as a rib. If it was longer, it would pull even more. And if it was not cotton, it would pull even more, because obviously cotton doesn't work quite in the same way. Okay, that's definitely better than that one. Ignore that one. And I will see at the end to show you how to join on this side. So here we have finished our rib. You can see that we've got our nice slip stitches along here. We've got a nice rib going on here. It's not too tight, but that's because it's cotton and I haven't gone down a hook size. When you get to the end here, you will have done all of your stitches. Now you may end up at the top, you may end up at the bottom. In all honesty, it doesn't matter too much. We're just going to join it by slip stitching, so we don't fasten off. But what we do is we turn the sleeve inside out. So we turn our sleeve inside out and work from the wrong side for the work. So after we've pushed it the inside out, we've got the edge here and the bump of our chain where we started, and we have our double crochets here, and we are going to work into the bump here and the back loop of the stitch here, and we're going to slip stitch to join. So we're just going to go over and pull through. So we're going to find that bump, the back loop, and then slip stitch. And you'll want to make this fairly loose. You don't want to make this too tight. We don't want it drawing in together and right at the end. So we need to make sure that we keep our loop a little bigger than usual, just so that we don't do it too tight. So going into there and there. If you can't find the bump and you want to use the front loop, then please do feel free to do it. The seam will be underneath your sleeve, so it really won't be noticeable at all. So I've got 2 more to do. So there's my bump, there's my back loop. You'll notice that we're pushing the front loops through, and there's my bump. The last one here is going to be a bit tight because it's the bottom of my chain. Actually, we're going to that one there, and the back loop here, yarn over and slip stitch. And then if you want to, you can slip stitch into here. I'm not going to, I'm just going to fasten off, and then we'll tie in the ends. And then when we turn it around the other way, you can see that that looks fairly smooth on that side, and on the other side of the rib it does look slightly different to the other parts of the rib, but not significantly, and I think you won't notice that in the join. If I show you a join on the original one, and as I said, you may be going up, you may be going down. So you can see here, this is the join just here, and really and truly you can barely see that. I think this time I slip stitched across the top. So you can slip stitch across the top or turn inside out and slip stitch across the bottom. There. You can see that that's the last row that I did.